Hello, and welcome to the Sugar Bell Review, a program dedicated to learning about the people, places, and policies that make up the Bellbrook Sugar Creek community. Our goal is to discover the vast diversity of interests, talents, and cultures that fill our neighborhoods. This stage is a place for voices to be heard, life experiences to be shared, and love to be spread. We want to celebrate the things that make us unique and the things that bring us together. We are Bellbrook Sugar Creek, and together we are strong. Tonight, we have with us again David Graham. He is here to help us understand the differences in levy types. Thank you so much for joining us.
Certainly. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
We enjoyed having you on Sunday, and we're grateful you could come back. So if I'm to understand, we have 4 different kinds of levies that we're going to discuss tonight?
Yes, there are 4 primary types of levies. The first is inside millage. It's not actually a voted levy. It's something that was created back in 1933 when at that time there were 15 mills of millage available to every taxing district that existed within or every subdivision within that taxing district. And because of the Great Depression, that 15 mills was knocked down to 10 because too many people were losing their houses over property taxes. It's kind of funny, the same argument that's being made today. So that inside millage, like I said, it's a maximum of 10 mills, and it's shared by the school district, the county, the municipality, the township that were in existence at the time that millage was divided up. So that generally makes up a fairly small percentage of the total millage that you pay. So that 10 mills, if you look, I'd say the average millage in Greene County is probably around 70 mills. So that 10, of course, divided by the 70 total, it makes up a relatively small percentage of the total. Inside millage is unique because it works the way you would think that all tax rates would work. It's a fairly simple mathematical calculation. Value times rate equals taxes. So if values go up 10%, the revenue from that inside millage goes up 10%. Same thing when we had the recession and we were seeing property values decrease. Governments were seeing less money from that inside millage because there is no adjustment to that rate. It is purely a one-for-one relationship. Value goes up 10%, taxes go up 10%.
That's a lot more simple comparatively to understand. And it's something, if I remember correctly, it's actually written into the Constitution of the state.
That is correct. That is correct. So like I said, that is one type of millage. So the other probably unique millage in that it always acts the same way are fixed sum levies. Now, fixed sum levies are there are only 2 types. You have bond retirement, which a lot of the school districts, and I know Bellbrook Sugar Creek School District has a bond retirement levy, and then an emergency levy. And these levies are unique in that they're intended to generate a specific amount of money. So when an emergency levy is put on the ballot, it is for a specific dollar amount. So if you're trying to raise $5 million, the calculation of the rate is really just taking the total valuation, dividing that into the amount of money that you're trying to generate, and that gives us the tax rate. So in this case, where on inside millage, it didn't matter why your value changed, your revenue changed. In this case, it doesn't matter why your value changed, your rate changes. So if you get new construction, the emergency rate is reduced so that it generates the same amount of money. Same thing with a reappraisal. We're working on our 2020 reappraisal and trying to finalize a lot of that information. And so when I reappraise the property, that tax rate will go down so that it generates the same $5 million or however much was on the ballot.
Okay, so, and emergency levies are generally it could be for any of the public services. Can you use one, correct?
So emergency levies are limited to school districts,
okay,
and they are intended for general operations of that school district.
And the bond levies are for building?
Yeah, generally that's the most popular levy that you would see a bond retirement levy issued for would be a new building. You could actually do a bond for school buses.
Okay.
It would be a much shorter time period, but yeah, you could anything that you could issue debt for in order to purchase something that has a useful life
Okay.
beyond the life of the
So a
debt.
building or a school bus would
Right.
be, so if, say for instance, Bellbrook Sugar Creek's buses are getting on the older side, so if they needed to replace them, it would make more sense for them to use probably a bond levy to, okay, so we need these physical objects to utilize. Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of fixed sum, so essentially you're saying that even if new construction is put up, they don't get any extra money from it, right? It just means that the amount of money that they're getting gets spread out among more people.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is
So
correct.
essentially with an emergency levy, when more construction is put in, it actually brings everybody's taxes down unless they can find some way of incorporating the new construction.
That is correct.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So like I said, that literally is a fixed sum. Now bond retirement is a little bit different because instead of it trying to generate that $5 million or whatever was voted each year, with bond retirement it's tied to the debt schedule.
Okay.
So
So as they pay it off.
right. So as the payments change, the rate would change also.
It would go down as well.
Right.
And it's a yearly thing for the fixed sum. So every year it's the same amount, or is it the amount for a certain set period of time?
So the levy is for a specific set period of time. So that levy would, if it's a 5-year levy and it were to generate $5 million, it would generate $5 million over each of those next years. The Budget Commission actually sits and sets those rates every year based on the calculation that my office performs.
Okay, so that's essentially you would come in and every year we would look to see how much new development has happened and you would spread the amount out among the other people, and then every year you'd make the same assessment.
Correct.
Okay. So it's a very different than the fixed rate levies, correct?
Correct. So fixed rate levies are the most complex and unfortunately the most popular also. So now I keep focusing on why value changes, and I've always said regardless. Well, with fixed rate levies, it actually does matter why the value changes. So fixed rate levies they're voted levies. They're intended to fund everything from your fire, your police, your schools, but they're unique in that if I reappraise your property, the subdivision does not get additional revenue, because what happens is that effective tax rate gets rolled back so that it doesn't generate more money. And we'll go through kind of an example. However, if instead you were to have new construction, the subdivision would get additional money. So if you were to think of an example where you have a house that's worth $100,000 and there's a 2 mil fire levy that's passed, and that levy costs you $70 per year.
Okay.
I come along and I do my statutory duty and I reappraise your property, and I appraise it at $150,000. So that 2 mil levy, what will actually happen is it will have a reduction factor applied to it and have an effective tax rate, and that's all the jargon I'll try to use. But the effective tax rate is the important part, because that 2 mil levy would be reduced down to an effective rate of 1.7 mils. So that levy would still just cost you $70 per year. Okay, and in that example, it's real. I'm keeping it simple because that's the only property that has to pay this levy. But instead, let's say you did a $50,000 addition to your house. It wasn't me reappraising your house, it was that you did an addition to it. And in that case, that levy would now generate, $105 a year, because the levy doesn't have a reduction factor for that new construction. New construction does not cause that tax rate to adjust at all, and instead that subdivision gets more money for that new construction. And if you think about it, maybe a little harder to think about it in terms of an addition on a house, but if you think of a new housing subdivision going in, that's going to be a higher demand for services, and government needs more money in order to provide those services. They don't get it off of everybody else, they get it from that new property that came in. So again, this is one of those where why the value changes really matters. If it's a reappraisal change, the tax rate is reduced so that the levy generates the same amount of money. If it's a new construction change or anything other than a reappraisal change, then that tax goes up or down. So we've actually saw that in Beaver Creek with the tornadoes that came through. Beaver Creek lost value because of the injured and destroyed properties that occurred. that is not a reappraisal change. That is a change to the characteristics of that property, and it's not new construction, obviously, but I like to lump everything into new construction because it's something that's more intuitive. But so in that case, those levies, there's no adjustment to that tax rate to bring it up. So they actually generated less money than what they did in the prior year.
Okay. So in many ways, it's kind of almost like, unless it is some sort of, I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this, unless it is some sort of change that would be more of a physical change to the property. So either a new house is put on it, or an addition is made on it, or it's destroyed. It's almost like it's a fixed amount of money. So no matter how many people are moving in or moving out, or that whoever, whether it's the fire department or the parks and rec or the schools, they're essentially on a sort of a fixed budget when they have that type of levy in play.
Yeah, as long as, except for the new construction portion, but
or the destruction.
Or the destruction. But I mean, and the other thing I always think that's important to remember is that we have fast-growing areas, but even those fast-growing areas, their new construction probably makes up maybe 3% of their total value. And so a 3% growth per year generally doesn't keep up with necessarily the inflationary factors. And when you consider 3% as the maximum I've probably ever seen in a new construction change in a given year.
Which is funny, because it seems like there's a lot of new construction in the area, but I suppose it's that the taxes don't change on the construction unless the house is completed, correct?
Well, that's right. We pick up new construction every year. We pick it up a year behind when the construction actually occurs. A whole nother show for that. But it's just important to remember that new construction, while you see a lot of new construction going on, if you compare that to the value of the base of the subdivision, Bellbrook could get $10 million houses, but it still doesn't compare to the $30 million or whatever their total value is as a subdivision. So those are things that you have to keep in mind. So the last type of levy is actually a combination of an emergency and a fixed rate. It's called a substitute levy.
That is. Yeah, I just didn't think it could get more complicated, and you threw a curveball at me.
Well, that's because we have our legislators involved in it. So
the government to thank for complicating things.
So a substitute levy, what it does is it guarantees you the same amount of money you received in the prior year on that levy. So it kind of acts like an emergency levy. This is the amount of money you are guaranteed. But it does allow you to generate additional money off of that new construction. So when that new construction occurs, that becomes your new base. Now, so in a lot of ways, if you hear that description and you think about what I said about fixed rate levies, reappraisal changes, they get nothing additional, but on new construction, they get new money. But think about it if we had a reappraisal decrease. This is where it's different than a fixed rate levy. So if reappraisals cause values to go down, they are still guaranteed that amount of money. Or if there were a tornado, they're guaranteed the amount of money they received in the prior year on that levy. They just wouldn't have any, maybe they wouldn't get any new construction on that. So there are subtle differences, but in a lot of ways, in a growing market, they work very similar to a fixed rate levy.
Okay, so essentially with the substitute levy, they essentially won't really raise the homeowners that were already paying the levy much. It will kind of bring it back up to what it was originally as the new homes were put in, and it just incorporates the new homes.
Correct. So very similar. Like I said, in a growing market, it works exactly like a fixed rate. It's when you have a declining market that you would see the subtle differences in that they get that guaranteed amount. So you would actually possibly see that rate go up at times instead of go down at times.
For a declining market.
Right.
Are any of the markets in Greene County declining currently?
Currently, I would say we have maybe a few that are growing at a lesser amount or a lesser percentage. I don't even know that we have any that are truly stagnant. But over the last several years, we obviously went through that. Since 2008's reappraisal, we've probably seen declining values more than we've seen increases in values, and now we've really seen that turn. If you just look at any of the housing statistics, the number of houses that are available for sale are so minimal that's driving values, and that's kind of my job, is to value what's there, based on sales. So. that's kind of where we are.
Well, it's a very nice to have this succinct sort of explanation on these basics that are still extremely complex.
Yeah.
And we do thank you for coming in and explaining that to me
Certainly.
and to the audience. And we hope that you can come in and do several more of these with us in the future on different parts and aspects of taxes in the county. If there is any way, if anybody has questions on the show, where should they send the questions?
So if you have questions, you can go to the Greene County Auditor's website, and I have my email link is right there. If you click it, it's a form, unfortunately, instead of a direct email, but they come directly to me. I'd be happy to answer your questions. I'd be happy to walk you through some of the information that we have. We have a white paper on our real estate page of the Auditor's website that goes through a lot of the information on how we arrive at a value, how taxes are calculated. And I invite people to truly take the opportunity to understand and ask those questions. This is why I'm here.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And you have a wonderful Wednesday after you leave here. And we hope everyone else has a phenomenal or has had a phenomenal Wednesday.